How do you find a high current power amplifier? This question comes from Sebastian in Bavaria, Germany. Woo! That reminds me of beer, which Bavaria, now I lived in Munich, so that's got to be, in the Schwabing area, and I used to play around in there, and Ludwigstrasse brings back a lot of memories. Anyway, Sebastian writes, I'm really considering to buy a pair of Magneplanar 7s. Internet wisdom, there's that word, that's like, what is the other one? Military intelligence, internet wisdom, seems to be that you need a high power and high current amplifier to drive them effectively. The power rating is always listed on an amplifier, and I can see if the amp can deliver enough power, at example 4 ohms, but is there a way to see how much current the amp can deliver? What am I looking for in the spec sheet, and does this even make sense, as my limited knowledge in electronics would suggest that when you have a given power and impedance, the current wouldn't matter? Boy. We struggle with this a lot because internet wisdom has so many things going back and forth and flying around and saying this and that, and we get confused. Let me try and put it as simply as I know how to do. Current, impedance, and output voltage are all sort of wrapped up in one term which we call wattage. So a simple formula, amps times volts equals watts, right? So what does that mean? Well, amperage is current, which is the motive force, the ability to move something and power something. Voltage is the pressure, the how high that is, and together we can say we can make a watt. So here's what I struggle with. I wish I were a better communicator, because as I say those words, when I say that to another engineer, they look at me and go, yep, get it. Voltage is pressure, current is the motive force, but that doesn't really tell us anything, does it? Because if we don't understand that, we don't truly grasp this whole thing. And I think maybe I don't want this to be a lecture in electrical theory, because that's not going to do you any good, and it doesn't help anybody. The easiest way to answer Sebastian's question, perhaps, is to ignore all the other stuff that people are telling you and focus on wattage into a given load. And the load is impedance. So, for example, on a Magneplanar, which actually is a fairly easy load to drive. There's a lot of mystery going on about Magneplanars, and I'll explain that in a second. If the impedance is 4 ohms, and you have an amplifier that can deliver 400 watts into 4 ohms, that's really all you need to know about that amplifier, other than how it handles varying impedances. And so let me explain. If we can all agree that impedance and wattage, this much watts, this many watts at this given impedance, is a perfect indicator of the current that an amplifier can produce. And we don't even have to understand how it all works, it's voltage and amps and all that stuff. All we need to know is that for a given impedance, we can output this many watts. Then, once we have that in our heads, all we now need to know are 2 things from the speaker. We need to know its sensitivity, and we need to know how much its impedance varies. Okay, so let's start with impedance, because I think this is something people struggle with a lot. When you see a loudspeaker that says it is a 4 ohm loudspeaker, that is a nominal rating. What does that mean? Nominal means average. On average, it's 4 ohms. So you can ask the manufacturer, you can call us. We'll be happy to walk you through it. I'll probably repeat this more and more. And I don't mean to make it sound salesy, because I don't want it to be that. I just want you to rely on calling us at PS Audio or emailing us with questions that we can help you answer, because that's what we do. We've got people sitting around all day waiting for someone to call. They call a lot and they ask questions. So call us and ask, we'll explain that to you. But nominal means average. So when we have an average impedance of 4 ohms, what you want to do is look at the manufacturer's specs of an impedance graph. So what's the lowest impedance it hits? So at certain frequencies, some speakers dip way down. I remember a pair of Infinity Kappas that were the death of power amplifiers. We fixed a lot of PS Audio amplifiers that were driving Kappa loudspeakers because Arnie and Bascom wanted to get more bass out of that speaker, and the way they did that is put this special circuit in there that dipped the impedance to 0.5 ohm, which, if an amplifier isn't properly protected, can kill it. And before we learned the art of protecting amplifiers, which now it's no problem, it just cuts it off. But way back when we were learning, we just lost amplifiers. So you want to look, how low of an impedance does the amplifier go? And then the next thing you want to know is, can your amplifier handle those low impedances? So if you were to call us and say, hey, I'm thinking about the Stellar M700 stack, or I'm thinking about a BHK amp, and my speakers are blah, blah, blah. Well, one of the things we're going to look at is, all right, what are their nominal impedance? And then we're going to look and see how low does it dip in impedance and at what frequencies. If it's just a tiny dip somewhere, we don't care about it. But if that sucker dips down to 0.5 ohm, if it dips down to 1 ohm, then you'd better have an amplifier that is capable of handling those dips, which is current, but again, we only need to know wattage or how it reacts under that. So what was the other one I was going to explain? Does that make sense? I hope that does. So those, you need to know how many watts at what impedance an amplifier can provide. Then you need, sensitivity. Yeah. Then you need to know, where does your speaker lie? Now, it happens to be that Magneplanars are pretty even. Their nominal impedance doesn't dip a lot unless it's changed in the last years. Generally, it doesn't dip a lot, and they're fairly easy to drive, except for one thing. They're not very efficient. So the Magneplanars I am familiar with are like 85 or 86 dB sensitive, which means for 1 watt of input, you'll get 86 dB output. That's not very loud. You need quite a lot of power to drive a set of Magneplanars into the upper 90s so you can have it play loud. And if dynamic peaks are important in the kind of music you listen to, as it is in the kind of music I listen to, big orchestral stuff, then your amp better have some good moxie in there. So if you have a Magneplanar, I would recommend one of our M700s or a pair of BHK monoblocks, depending on what you can afford, because those suckers can drive that all day long. But those are the things you need to know. Wattage for a given impedance, and from the speaker, what are the impedance dips? How low does it go in impedance? At what frequency? Is it a frequency we care about? And its sensitivity. So something that is around 87, 88, 90, very efficient, very sensitive, not hard to drive. Lower than that, you're going to need some watts. Hope that helps. And call us anytime, 800 PS Audio. Just give us a call. We'll walk you through all this stuff. Whether you own our stuff or not, doesn't matter. Your family. Okay, talk to you later.